This episode of Creep Street Podcast is brought to you by Martini Coffee Roasters. Martini Coffee Roasters is not a martini-flavored coffee. In fact, it is a family-owned and operated company run by the Martini family. And while I'm sure they enjoy a good cocktail, they are all about that high-quality, smooth, flavorful coffee. Unlike many other roasters, Martini Coffee Roasters roast manually using a traditional method of roasting, most relying on sight and sound to ensure the best results, okay? This is quality, people. This is artisanal. This is handmade. This is what you're wanting. And not only that, but they also sell green coffee beans for those home roasters out there. So please support small businesses and check out Martini Coffee Roasters at martinicoffee.com. Once again, check out Martini Coffee Roasters at martinicoffee.com.
You've taken a wrong turn down Creep Street.
Citizens of the Milky Way, my name is Dylan Hackworth.
I'm Maureen Bogey.
And this is Creep Street. Oh, real quick up top, please follow us on Facebook and Instagram at Creep Street Podcast, Twitter at Creep Street Pod. On our Facebook, there is another subgroup called Citizens of the Milky Way. It's just like a little place where we hang out with you, the listeners, and everyone just kind of posts articles they like, memes they like. Anyone's welcome to join. You just click join, and we will let you in there. And I'm trying to get through this because, as we know, this is our 1-year episode.
This
1 year anniversary.
Our 1 year anniversary. I cannot believe it.
And we had 2 new people join the Patreon this week, so I'm going to go ahead and start listing those names now since we got a couple new ones.
Let's do it. Thank you.
Yes, if you want to support us on Patreon, of course, you go to patreon.com/Creep Street Podcast where you can get all sorts of goodies. And here, let me read off to you the Patreon donors at our top tier: The Dream, James Watkins; The Finnish Face, Via Alungfist; The Madman, Marcus Hall; The Vivacious Vicky McHugh; The Tenacious Teresa Hackworth; The Heartbreak Kid, Chris Hackworth; The Oh-So-Suave, Sean Richardson; The British Bonebreaker, Bex Martin; The Notorious Nicholas Barker; The Terrifying Taylor Lashmet; The Count of Cool, Cameron Corliss; The Archduke of Attitude, Adam Archer; and the newcomers, The Sinister, Sam Kiker; and the Nightmare of New Zealand, Noeline Vivilli. Yes. Once again, if you would like to join those patrons and get a lot of extra goodies, go to patreon.com/Creep Street Podcast.
That's right.
So excited to have new patron members. Obviously, thank you, Sam Kiker, for joining us. So happy to have you. And also, Noeline Vivilli. We're so happy to have her as part of our Patreon community. She lives down in New Zealand. Mm-hmm. She has a podcast of her own called JMS Cult Survivors. She herself is a survivor of that cult, which she works to raise awareness of the JMS Providence cult, which I believe is based, like in South Korea, maybe.
I think it's in Korea, yeah.
And, but is international. It's in Australia. It's in New Zealand. Mm-hmm. So it's obvious it's causing problems in multiple places, not just there. That's what her mission is: to sort of raise awareness of the damage this cult is causing, and to empower those trying to escape who have escaped. Mm-hmm. And we are going to do a little research on the cult ourselves because we want to have her on in the future to talk to us about it. So we are very happy to welcome our 2 new patrons.
Yes.
Noeline and Sam, so happy to have you.
Thank you, guys. Wow. I mean, a year.
A year, guys.
An actual solar calendar year.
That's right.
Hath gone by.
Now, usually we like to get right to it at the top, but since this is a year-long episode, we just want to take a few minutes up top to just say, first of all, thank you so much.
Yes, of course.
This podcast has exploded in a good way. And we are just so grateful and flattered and cannot wait for the exciting things to come. We have big things coming.
We do. And we really we see all the support that you give us, and we so appreciate it. We so appreciate when everyone reaches out and gets in touch with us. And if you have gotten in touch with us and we haven't responded, it's not because we don't want to respond. Sometimes things get lost.
Yes.
And so if we have not responded to you, it's not because we don't want to. It's because it was an accident.
It was an accident, yeah.
So I just want to make that clear. But yes, this podcast this year has been amazing. Thank you so much for all of the support. And in the future, of course, we are going to keep on serving up these creepy, scary podcasts.
That's right.
But we kind of have our eyes set beyond just the podcast.
That's right. We're going to start doing some YouTube content. We're going to start doing some fun stuff with our Patreon, like Netflix viewing parties.
Right.
We're working on that. A lot of fun stuff coming in 2021.
Yes, we want to start doing some. Yeah, that's right. Some sketches, some video sketches, some comedy sketches. Dylan and I have a big background in comedy, as many of you may know.
Yes.
Also, we are really wanting to get into making some film, some short and feature-length horror films. So
we want to make a Creep Street video game.
That's right. I don't want to be hyperbolic, but I feel like I am in the Steve Jobs garage right now. So 2021, we've got some great stuff. And if you have any suggestions, comments, questions, ideas, anything like that, please feel free to reach out at any time if it's about the podcast or just any of the things we have mentioned or just really anything else you want. creepstreetpodcast@gmail.com or DM us on social media.
Absolutely. Our very first episode was on shadow people.
Shadow peeps.
And we're bringing it back to where it all began because today our episode is Shadow People 2, The Hatman.
The Hatman is a prolific figure in the world of the paranormal and high strange.
That's right.
And just, what's the word I'm looking for? Sleep paralysis, but also just kind of sleep world.
Yeah.
I guess.
Okay.
I don't know. We'll travel there in a minute. We're just getting started, baby. So, Shadow People. As we said, Shadow People was our first episode.
Right.
If you want to listen to that before we do this, you can. It is not necessary.
Not necessary at all. It's not like a sequel where it picks up. No.
Right.
No.
We're just popping off. So Shadow People in general, for those who may not know too much about them, it's a very mysterious and kind of highly debated topic in the world of weird and strangeness. But essentially what they are is exactly what they sound like.
Right.
These dark, shadowy figures that seem usually like a figure of kind of like a human shape. Sometimes it's really, really clear, like you can see that it's for sure got the head and shoulders, arms, legs. Sometimes it's more of kind of like a gauzy shape. And sometimes there's even heard like shadow cats and other animals as well. But usually it's shadow people. And these shadow figures, who they are or what they are is unknown, but it's thought it could be a few different things. There is one shadow person or shadow figure specifically that is seen time and time again. He's iconic, but he's also one of the only, or maybe even the only, distinct shadow person.
Right.
And that is called the Hatman.
Oh yes, we mentioned him briefly in episode 1, but today he's getting a focus. Whatever this thing is, this creature.
It's getting his time. My sources for today, there were really many that I had to look through for this episode because the Hatman, is kind of niche. He is the big daddy, don't get me wrong, but also there isn't as much information or research on this phenomena as there may be with just shadow people in general or things like that.
Which I have a theory that shadow people, I don't know how, but I feel like shadow people are like the key to whatever that world is. The paranormal world, I feel like Hatman and shadow people are the key. Because Hatman is the one time I've seen people who are not interested in this stuff at all go, wait a second, I've seen that.
Yeah. Isn't that so weird?
I think there's something special about this.
I totally agree. I completely agree. And like you said, it's so funny. You can just tell so much by the person that's telling you this or by the person that you've heard this from. It's just not that people you would think would experience that or even talk about it. So that just makes it feel even more real.
Right.
So as I was saying, I used a bunch of different sources, but I would say my main sources, a couple videos on YouTube. One was called Hatman Nightmares and Sleep Paralysis Are Happening Around the World, and that was by Quartz News, and the journalist was Corinne Puddle. Also, another video called The Grim Gallery, based on the Hatman, and that is by Blue Lava 6. I highly recommend both of those videos. Also, I had an article from History.com called How a Terrifying Wave of Unexplained Deaths Led to a Nightmare on Elm Street by Thad Morgan.
Wow.
And of course, Reddit, all the, those
Right.
guys as well were very helpful in my research.
Blue Lava 6 sounds like a band from late 90s, early 2000s.
For sure, big time.
It just sounds like a band.
Yeah, I got my first hickey in the car while I was listening to a Blue Lava 6 CD.
Yeah.
But going back to just shadow people in general for a minute here. Shadow people have been linked to something called sleep paralysis, which I'm sure a lot of people have heard of or maybe even experienced themselves. Basically where your brain wakes up before your body wakes up.
Right.
Layman's terms.
Yeah.
So you're able to move your eyes and you can breathe and you're awake and conscious, but your body is paralyzed.
Right.
So really, it seems, to my understanding, really the only way to kind of get out of this is to fall back asleep and then to wake up properly. I mean, not the only way. I'm sure eventually you would. It's not like you're going to be paralyzed forever. You will. It'll be fine if this happens to you. But it is a very, very scary situation.
Absolutely.
And something that so many people talk about is that they see these shadow figures in the bedroom with them while they're in this state of sleep paralysis.
Right.
Sometimes they'll feel like an intense pressure on their chest or maybe even a choking sensation, which makes it hard for the person to breathe.
Right.
And this is not a new phenomenon at all. This is actually something that goes way, way back. In Assyrian Babylon, there was, they believed in an evil spirit that leapt on top of people as they slept. In ancient Greece, there was reports by a doctor that a demon was pushing on the chests of his patients, making it hard for them to breathe at night as well.
This is one of those things, too, where it's like different cultures paint it a different way.
Right.
And maybe give it a different backstory, but it's like the same thing.
Yes.
Which makes it more creepy, I think.
I do too.
Each culture might have a different story for it or, maybe give it a little bit of its own spin, but like it's at the core, it's that same thing.
Exactly. Sometimes they feel like this shadow person, they feel like they actually can see the shadow person, like pushing down or sitting on them or choking them.
Oh boy.
Sometimes people say they just feel that sensation while the shadow person is just in the room.
Right.
But a lot of the times people will see specifically the Hatman. Now let's talk about what the Hatman even looks like. So the Hatman is said to be wearing a 3-piece suit with a trench coat, and some people say they see a pocket watch connected to a chain on his belt and obviously a hat. It can be described anywhere from a classic fedora to maybe a little bit of a wider brimmed hat, but it's that kind of style hat. It's not like it's ever, like a baseball hat or something. It's always kind of brim all the way around.
Right. Whether it's
hat.
Fedora or, a top hat. Yeah. It's
top hat. That's a good other option. Yeah. I just don't know my hats well enough,
the
unfortunately.
The pocket watch is a new thing to me. I'd never heard that.
I hadn't heard that until I was researching this episode, because obviously I'd done a lot of reading about the Hatman in the past just because of researching other things. And it wasn't until this time that I'd really heard the pocket watch thing. So yeah, that is weird. And not everyone says that they see all of these things, because as we said, the Hatman is a shadow person, and he is described as being darker than dark. It's not that he is shadow or black. It's like he's a void. It's like he's blacker than black.
Right.
And so it seems like my impression is that the first time people see him, all they can really make out is that he seems to be a man that's wearing a hat.
Right.
And he's anywhere from between 6 to 10 feet tall.
Right. So like I'm like 6'2", 6'3".
You could be a Hatman.
So, but I'm like the smallest version of Hatman you would see though.
Sure, yeah. Speaking of Hatmen, that's another thing. Is this all the same man or entity, or are there multiple entities that are all invoking the same image?
Right. Or is it just 3 kids inside a trench coat?
Right. Which is honestly an option. So usually when people see him, they really can only see like an outline of, well, I mean, they can see that it is a solid figure, but all they can really make out is the outline. But some people say, though, that they can't really see or tell anything from like below the shin. So it's not really clear if that means he does have feet or whatever, but it's just too dark to tell, or if maybe there is nothing there and he's able to just float, or, I don't really know, obviously. But people who see the Hatman once, it often seems that they see the Hatman again. Right. That's not always true. Sometimes people say that they've only seen him once throughout their whole life and that's it. But overall, it seems like people usually see him more than once. And that's when you kind of you hear more detail. Maybe it's because you're able to get a better look. It's not as shocking. I'm sure it's always scary, but you are kind of know what's going on, so you're able to look at it more. Maybe that's what it is. Right. I'm not sure. And some people have even said to be able to make out a smile on the Hatman's face.
Interesting.
That seems to get bigger and bigger as you get more and more scared. And that's another thing that we've talked about with shadow people, with all hauntings, really. I mean, demonic activity. We've talked about this so much, about how these things feed off of the fear. They feed off of that negative energy.
Right. Which poses the question, are they dangerous, or do they seem more dangerous than they really are, and they're just there sort of getting a snack, getting a hit? I think we called it a fear bomb.
That's right, fear bombs.
Just getting that hit, baby. You know what I'm saying?
Exactly. This is, I think, a peak time of fear bonging.
Yeah.
When you're just, like, humans are bombs. So just to clarify, for those who may not remember that from one of our previous episodes, the idea of a fear bong, is that human beings are a bong, and our fear is that stanky, danky weed. And then a lot of these things, they feed off of the fear. So then they take a fat hit. So then they scare you by being there, aka the lighter flicking. Right. You get scared, and then you release that stanky weed, aka fear, and instead of it making them just want Lucky Charms, it makes them strong.
And what is it we said, like something it might not have originally been real, but your belief, what's that word?
Yes, a tulpa.
A tulpa.
Do you want to tell the people about a tulpa?
Yes, a tulpa. You've heard us say it before, but it's been a while since we said it. So in case you forgot, or in case we, this is theoretical, obviously. Right. Take like Slenderman. We know Slenderman started off as an online thing. Is it possible, like a tulpa would be something like that? Something that started off not real, but collective belief made it real. Obviously, this is just a theory, but is the Hatman something like that? Something, that wasn't really real, but it's been in our folklore for thousands of years that we've made it real by our collective belief and fear of these things.
Exactly, and that's the idea behind that is how powerful the human mind is, which I really believe in and I really do like. Right. And I think evolutionarily that probably makes sense, that we focus more on the bad things so that we can be aware, so that we can know what's going on. And so we're thinking about all the options, like, oh yeah, that tiger could leap out and, eat my ass in a negative way. Right. I think now there's a lesson here we can learn. We are able to focus more on the positive. We don't have to be so afraid.
That's right.
We don't have to be. Kind of change your mindset. When I get those feelings, when I feel like something is not right, or I feel a bad energy like in the room, or I don't know, I just try to imagine myself and those around me in the whole room just kind of like encased in a white light.
That's right.
And it seems to help.
Yeah.
But another thing about the Hatman, about it maybe feeding off of fear, another way of looking at it, or maybe just another side of it too, is that the Hatman seems to appear to people who are going through a hard time. Right. Whether they're depressed, anxious, have had some sort, negative or traumatic experience. Right. And it can really range the whole gamut,
Right,
it's not
exactly.
It's not like my, pain wasn't that bad. Like, why am I seeing the Hatman? It's just, it's different.
Exactly. It's just pain is pain. Obviously.
Exactly. So they're often seen there, and they're often seen in dark areas, like literally dark places, that's why I think they're often seen while you're in your room at night, going to sleep. The lights are off. They're also said to be seen in basements a lot. Basements are also, dark and scary. They just are.
Which is interesting. It's dark, but like we said, these things, they're darker than dark. It's almost like, remember in Bridgeport Poltergeist, the priest was in the basement, and they saw the shadow figure, and he was blessing, and he looked over and he saw this image, and it was darker than the shadow, and it seemed to move. Remember that? It was sort of like that.
Exactly, and that's, I think, maybe a part of the reason why you don't see these guys during the day, or just when you have all the lights on and stuff, is because they can't hide. In the dark, even though they're like more of a void, they're like darker than dark.
Exactly.
It's still easier to hide when everything around you is dark. But that also plays into your eyes playing tricks on you, which is totally a thing. Right. So it's like, that's what makes it hard to differentiate, and also probably for the person experiencing it, probably makes it just super unclear, or makes you just feel unsure about what you're seeing, because you're like, maybe I saw something over there, but it's dark over there, so I don't really know what I saw. Though they have been said to be seen in these dark places, if it's dark enough, if it's indoors or whatever, to be seen throughout many different times of the day. But usually they seem to happen at night, like we said, because it was dark. But they also seem to pop up at a certain point of your sleep cycle as well.
Right.
It's like, I think it's like the third or fourth stage of the pre-REM sleep. Is when these things start to happen. These shadow figures begin to appear. And I believe that's right. Don't quote me on that. I'm not a doctor for crying out loud. But I believe that's right. And I don't know if that's always when sleep paralysis hits as well, or if that's also just when maybe having these quote-unquote hallucinations might be. But something that I think is weird about it too is that it's like, okay, if this is just something that's kind of like a misfiring in my brain.
Right.
And it's not only thought to just be a misfiring, it's thought to be that, as I said before, you're kind of waking up and you're kind of in this weird state. And so you're seeing things around you, just your surroundings, and you don't know what they are. But when you're in this kind of really vulnerable position, when you're asleep, your body kind of goes into kind of like a primal mode, where anything you see that you don't know what it is, you're turning it into something negative or dangerous so that you can take action in fight or flight, basically. And that explains why, if people are just, if these things, shadow people or the Hatman specifically, if they are just hallucinations, then why are so many people seeing the exact same thing? And even if they're not the exact same thing, then why are they always connected with dread or with terror? Or why are they always negative? They're some of these things, these hallucinations shouldn't always be negative.
Right.
So that's just something that I, of course believe in sleep paralysis. It's not like I don't think that there is something going on with the brain or anything like that.
Most people, maybe you probably will get it at least once in your life.
Right.
Like I know I've had, just regular sleep paralysis. Like when I was younger, you feel, and it sucks. And I think some have it more frequent than others, obviously. Mm-hmm. We're also saying not every case of sleep paralysis is a supernatural
exactly,
thing.
Right.
We're just saying these things happen during, whether or not it's related, that specific instance of sleep paralysis has to do with this entity.
Right.
That's right. But we also know sleep paralysis happens naturally.
Exactly.
We're not saying every case of, I guess that's what I'm trying to say.
Totally.
Not every case of sleep paralysis. No, we don't think every case of sleep paralysis is something supernatural.
Right. And I think it's also, at the same time, it's like some people think you either have to think that every single case is sleep paralysis, or you have to think like, oh, this is for sure like a specific entity that is contacting us. I think you can kind of live somewhere in the middle, and I think it can kind of go back and forth depending, and I think it can kind of be both at the same time, honestly. There's this idea that, Dylan, what you were just talking to me about this the other day, about how humans, what if we are 4K, or what is...
like four-dimensional beings that can only view three-dimensional space.
I realized I said 4K, like a TV, but you understand, right? 4D and 3D. Yes.
Right. This is not my idea, by the way. I read this in an article online. I just thought it was, this is not me.
It's not just you. It's a theory that's out there. And I just think that's kind of interesting to think that maybe it's not that like, oh, thing that's happening is just in your mind. It's just a misfiring in your brain
Right.
as you're waking up or as you're falling asleep. It's maybe there's a misfiring in your brain, quote unquote misfiring, and it allows you to access something that
Right.
you weren't able to see before or feel or notice
Right.
or something like that. Or the other way around. You guys, whatever. Just whatever. What I think is interesting and fun and cool is that kind of fuzzy line where you're not sure which is which. Like, for example, with the Hatman, some people think, you know, like we said, he's often seen by a person who is going through a hard time or is depressed or, you know, so on.
Right.
And you think, oh, maybe this being or whatever is coming to find this person or to come to this person because they know they can feed off of these negative feelings. But the another thought too is maybe the Hatman or shadow people are manifestations of our own negative emotions.
Right.
Kind of like a poltergeist.
Oh, interesting.
With you know, someone entering their teens, usually a girl. Is where it's like, it's not that they bring the ghost there, it's that the poltergeist activity is just happening because there's so much going on in the body that it
Right.
affects the outside world. And that's a thought that maybe that's what the Hatman is as well.
Right. Interesting.
And that might make sense why people feel like they see him smiling, and the more fear they feel, the bigger the smile gets, which is horrifying. That's so scary.
And
I hate smiling.
There's another entity,
fuckers.
which we'll get into on another episode, called the Grinning Man, which sometimes overlaps with us. Some people think they're the same, but that's its own thing. I think that's so interesting and creepy. But yeah, the Grinning Man. It's as creepy as it fucking sounds.
I hate it. I hate it. I hate it.
Yeah.
I hate it. I hate it.
We'll have to do that soon.
I used to, when I was little, would make this face in the mirror with my eyes really wide and a really big smile, and I would scare the fuck out of myself.
Yeah,
and I don't know
used to do
why
that too.
I did
Scare
it.
myself too. I used to do that too.
I like hated being scared.
Yeah.
As a child, I wasn't into any of this stuff, and I don't know. It's just was. I guess it was just my inner little freak of the week popping up early. Now, a couple other things. You're imagining the Hatman, all of the ways and all of the situations that I have explained.
Yeah, of course.
You're laying in bed, but not only is he seen as a hulking, tall abyss of a man, many people also have encountered two glowing red eyes.
Bad news.
Bad news.
That's bad news, sir.
They'll see these glowing red eyes just staring at them.
Yeah.
And whether or not the eyes are glowing, if they can see the eyes or if they can't see the eyes, it's accompanied by an intense feeling of dread inside of you, even if you're not necessarily feeling that way in your life or just at that moment.
Right.
You feel it because you see this man. And the movement of the Hatman is also very weird.
Yeah.
He sometimes is seen walking, kind of just like a normal human, and exiting and entering rooms. But he's also seen kind of moving like very glitchy, kind of like a video game jumping ahead.
That's fucking wild.
Yes.
I had never heard that. And
Isn't
when we
that
came
fucking
across
scary?
that to me is so weird. Because then it's like,
Yeah.
it just offers up, it's like a whole new buffet of possibility of what it
Yeah.
could fucking be. Like, what if this is like, what if it's people, what if it's us from the future?
The future
what if this is just
time travelers,
like
yeah.
time travelers, and we go and we disguise ourselves as these things so we're nondescript.
Right.
Like, that's just wild. A glitch,
It's
like, that's so
weird.
fucking wild.
I mean, some other people have said that they have had situations while they are going through a bout of sleep paralysis and they feel like they see this hallucination, or sometimes people say this just when they're seeing paranormal activity in general, but they'll see either beings or shapes move like, and it looks like static on a TV.
Really?
Yes, like it's a being, but instead of it being like, you know, a dark abyss, it's like the static.
It's like the white noise of static or
Yeah,
something, or just whatever that the fuzz is of static.
They make that noise, and it like has that same like jumpy look of like the white, black, white, black,
That's
white, black.
interesting.
Yeah. And that makes me think too, like that kind of leans more towards maybe some either interdimensional or maybe they are just like a higher being, or maybe they're just something that's always been here. Like it's not even a being. It's just like some kind of electrical wave or something.
Right. Like a natural, like
radio or microwave or
right.
like, I don't know.
Maybe something the Earth gives off. It's not even supernatural. It's some just natural thing we don't know how to quantify yet.
Yeah, and for some reason our brains just put it together like that, or maybe it does actually look like that.
Yeah.
I don't know. But it's weird, and that makes sense to me though, because also a lot of times with shadow people and the Hatman, or just really any paranormal activity, there's often a lot of issues or things happening with electricity, with internet, with radio, with all of that stuff. So it kind of makes sense in a way, I think.
Yeah.
Going back a little bit before, when I said it's interesting that so many people see the same guy. They see the same exact outline. It's very familiar. And like we said, why do so many people feel like they see the same thing, even if they're all around the world, they never met obviously don't know each other, all of that. One thought is many of these people either consciously or subconsciously connect this frightening experience with one very big dude in horror. We're talking the big FK. We're talking big Freddy Krueger, a la Nightmare on Elm Street.
Oh my God.
If you think about what he looks like, it does kind of match, except for, like the claw hand, and really it's just the hat.
Do you think he's an Alfred or a Frederick?
Frederick. But like you said, it's not just the fact that he, has the hat. That's not the only thing that connects him to scariness in dreams. It's because he would attack people in their sleep, in their dreams. And so it makes sense that people would kind of go towards that, whether they even are a fan of the movie or not. Even if they've never seen it, it's just such a popular cultural thing that you see every, October. Now, I did a little bit of research into that because I think that's interesting. But I kind of wanted to see, okay, well, then what was Freddy Krueger based on? I was kind of like, okay, well, then what's, going on?
Right.
So Wes Craven said that he saw a man, like a drunk man in a hat as a young boy, and he just made this, super intense eye contact with him out in the street one day, and it really scared him.
Right.
So that's kind of how the hat situation got in there, at least in terms of Nightmare on Elm Street and Freddy Krueger.
Right.
But for the actual story, he was really inspired by these very mysterious deaths of these people who died in their sleep, very mysteriously.
This sounds like an episode.
Yes, it probably really could be. So the story with these people dying in their sleep is very, very sad, but I'm reading here from history.com, that article that I said my source here by Thad Morgan. I'm just going to read a little bit from that article directly. So the specific incident of this happening that really piqued Wes Craven's interest was the story of a child who had escaped with his family from the Cambodian genocide. And he was terrified to go to sleep because he, for some reason, I don't know all the details, felt like he would be attacked and killed in his sleep.
Oh, interesting.
He was secretly drinking a bunch of coffee. His parents were giving him sleeping pills, and he would hide them and just pretend to take them. Finally, one day, his body just had to go to sleep. So he just fell asleep. His parents put him in his bed, and that was that. They wake up to him screaming, and by the time they get to his room, he had died. It appeared that he had died in the middle of a nightmare. But unfortunately, this wasn't the only time something like this has happened.
Holy crap.
And now I'm going to read directly from my history.com source here. The story Craven described wasn't an isolated incident. Dozens of Southeast Asian refugees in America died for unknown reasons in their sleep during the mid-1980s. The mysterious deaths were usually among men in their 20s and 30s from the Hmong ethnic group, and affected a large enough segment of this population to alarm public health experts. And in 1981, there was an article that revealed there were 13 nocturnal Hmong deaths recorded from 1978 until 1981. Wow. So that's 13 people just mysteriously died in their sleep, mid-nightmare.
That's wild. I wonder if they just go into cardiac arrest, if it's...
It's very rare that happens, and it's very strange that it was happening at such a high rate within a small ethnic group.
Absolutely, and then a short period of time.
Yeah, it's very bizarre, yeah.
That's
and it's
wild.
very sad, and it seems to be happening to these people who are already in these terrible situations who have, were refugees and escaped, and
right.
yeah, it's
the trauma... itself is like haunting.
Exactly.
In like almost like in obviously trauma does haunt you, but I mean
Right.
haunting in almost like a literal sense,
Right.
like a literal presence.
Exactly.
That's wild.
Yeah, and we actually would like to dive deeper into this specific topic.
Yes.
So
maybe we'll make that a Patreon. Maybe we'll go into that deeper for this month's Patreon episode.
yeah, that would be a great idea.
Absolutely.
I would like that. But so we'll have to go because this is a fascinating topic. But this was kind of the idea that brought on Nightmare on Elm Street, and it connects so much to the Hatman in general and shadow people in general, sleep paralysis, all of it. It just seems so connected and with each other. Even without Nightmare on Elm Street, it would have all been connected, but with Nightmare on Elm Street, it's just even more so. Also, we're not saying that we think for sure, the Hatman was involved in the death of these Hmong men. That's
Right.
we're not saying like that's for sure what happened. It's just these are all things that are connected, interesting,
yeah.
and we just don't know what all of this means. And it's exciting, but it's also kind of it can be kind of frustrating because there is so much that we don't know, and it's hard to kind of get information compiled on this type of topic because it's not, accepted as anything more than just a hallucination that you see during sleep paralysis. And like we said, maybe that is all it is. I think it's kind of somewhere in between where sometimes it is, sometimes it's more, sometimes I don't know. That's kind of my thesis statement for just life. I don't know.
Right.
I think it's time that we dive into some stories.
Oh, we got some stories.
So we got 2 stories from 2 luscious, lovely folks.
That's right. One from my own family member, my cousin,
his literal flesh and blood,
Sam Hackworth.
Thank you, Sam.
This is something that happened to him. Super freaky.
And recently, too.
And recently, yeah.
So when I was in the Marine Corps, I fell asleep one night on the weekend. I fell asleep like I always do, and then I woke up, but I was on my back, and I couldn't move. I didn't have a roommate at the time, and my bed was positioned towards the kitchen hallway. I could only look out the corner of my eye, and I saw a man in the corner. He was only a silhouette, but I could see he was wearing a trench coat and a top hat. His head was tilted down, and he looked like he was ever so slowly creeping around the corner. So I tried to yell for help, because I lived right next to the duty desk. I thought someone could hear me, but I couldn't open my mouth. So I was just mumbling. I just closed my eyes really hard, and then I opened them again to try and jolt myself awake, and it sort of worked. It was almost like I woke up a second time and I was able to move again. I instantly got up and ran out of my room with no shoes on, no shirt, only shorts. I talked to my friend who happened to be on duty about it, and I noticed that all of the lights were off, which was very odd. My friend said that the power went out a couple minutes before I ran out. He said I was super pale, and I was probably having a panic attack. Super creepy moment in my life, and I will never forget it.
Wow.
That is so freaky.
Wow, Sammy.
The power going out.
Sammy. Damn, that's creepy.
Sam, thank God you were a Marine.
Yeah.
So you could fight that dang thing.
Wow, that was, yeah. And how wild that the power went out.
And that's another thing that kind of plays into what we were saying before about like the connection between the electrical waves or just electricity in general. I don't know. It's just there seems to be a pairing there.
Right. And remember, like, obviously this is different, but remember, like, in the Curse of King Tut, the power went out when one of the guys died. Like, the power in Cairo went out.
That's right.
Or something like that.
Yes.
But yeah, how wild is that?
It's so wild. And it's like one of those things where it could just be a coincidence, but it's a weird coincidence,
It's just weird. Well, there's so many ways you can make it symbolize something. It's so much, humans are very symbolic. We love symbols and we love to put meaning on things. Like that you could take that to mean a million different things. The light's going out. Like,
it gets your brain going. It kind of gets your blood flowing a little bit.
It does.
Now we've got another amazing story here. This one isn't exactly quite the Hatman we know him and love him as.
Right.
This is a little bit of a different way. This is very interesting. I think this is cool to kind of pair it together.
Absolutely.
Now, this story is from the lovely, lovely, lovely Hannah Jarvis Tomlinson, friend of the show.
Down in Kansas City, Missouri.
That's right. She also recently drew a beautiful picture of Dylan and I from our wedding. It's posted on her Instagram.
Yes, it's lovely. Thank you, Hannah.
Yes, and she has a studio called HJT Studios. Feel free to check her out on Instagram or Etsy and, just have fun with it. Hannah is also a friend of mine from the literal beginning of time.
Yeah.
We met at a very exciting time in your life, 5th grade. So I can attest to a little bit of what she is talking about. Hannah and some of our friends, including a dear friend of ours, Brittany, we would always play with a Ouija board in our friend Brittany's bedroom. I think we might have done it at Hannah's house a couple times too, but we didn't, at least I didn't really realize what we were even really doing.
Right.
I just think that might color a little bit of this this story for you. Okay, so I didn't know this was a phenomenon until I saw your post about Hatman. I looked into it, and I definitely had an experience as a child that to this day gives me chills, and my family as well. I was a very active dreamer/nightmare child. When I was maybe 9 years old, I had this one god-awful nightmare where a tall, thin, gaunt older man was in a dusty black trench coat and black hat had come into my house to pick off and kill my family members one by one. In this dream, he had already killed my parents and older sister. I had been hiding but ran out when I saw he was choking my then 6-year-old sister Jackie. I screamed and clawed and beat my fist against him until he threw Jackie against a wall and then started to choke me. As I was dying in my dream, I stared into his face and saw his hollow and sagging cheeks, his gray, sallow skin color, and his dead eyes. Cut to almost a year later, my family is packing our house up to move. I continued to have nightmares with this man frequently, in very similar fashions. As I was packing up my room, I had taken down my collage of 90s cutouts from my door. Hello, 90s kid. And as I am taking them down, I see a pattern formed in the faint paint and or dirt on the door. The Hatman's face had been marked on my door, like I had painted it from memory of that first nightmare. This has always haunted me, along with my sisters and mom who remember how much of a big deal this was at the time. Momo might even recall this from our childhood as we delved into our stint with Ouija boards and the paranormal. I have chills now writing about it, and I don't know if I should feel calmed or more frightened by reading Wikipedia pages about him.
Wow.
So that is a weird story. So this wasn't necessarily the shadow, but this sounds very, very similar though.
Right.
Maybe in her dream, she was able to see another side of this man. Maybe what he used to look like. Maybe what he really does look like deep down. I don't know. But it definitely sounds like the Hatman though. You know what I mean? Even though it's not a shadow. It just is weird. It's very weird. That freaks me out just reading that.
All right. Well, Maureen, thank you for doing all of that research.
Of course. Thank you guys. We have loved doing this podcast for the past year. And
62 episodes in 1 year. And that's just the main show, not including Patreon. I mean, 62 episodes in a year.
Good Lord.
Yeah.
We read a lot.
And we are going to just keep doing it. We love doing this.
We really do. It's been such a pleasure this past year. We can't wait for another great year because we all know that 2020 was awesome. If you would like to support the podcast, please feel free to give us a like, give us a rating, maybe a shout out on social media, anything like that. Those little things really do help and we really appreciate it. It really means the world and thank you. And of course, we also have our lovely Patreon where we would love if you would like to support us there as well. We have lots of bonus content that we add to every month for all tiers, not just the top tier. And if you're interested in that, or if you just want to just click around and check it out, feel free to check patreon.com/creepstreetpodcast.
That's right. Citizens of the Milky Way, my name is Dylan Hackworth.
I'm Maureen Bogey.
And this is Creep Street. Good night and goodbye.
Thank you.